Debugging for beginners. Many beginners quit because they cannot debug. In your day-to-day working with JavaScript or with programming in general, you can always run into errors. You can always run into issues or bugs that can make your code not to work the way you really want it to work or produce the kind of results that you expect. In situations like this, what do you do? What is common for programmers to do is that they will debug to find out the root cause of why something is not working the way they intend it to work or the way it should work. And this process of debugging, of finding errors or finding exception or issues in your code uh, can make beginners to quit because the process can look cumbersome to some people. Nevertheless, the only way you can find out why something is not working in your code is by debugging. And what exactly is debugging? Debugging means finding and fixing mistakes, bugs in your code. Bugs are normal. The skill is learning how to locate them quickly. So the skill of being a better debugger will only happen when you know how to locate bugs quickly in your code. So debugging simply means finding and fixing mistakes, bugs in your code. Because bugs are normal, which simply means that making mistakes is normal. But when you make the mistake, you should also find a way on how to fix such mistake. Now, why code does not work? In the first place, you might want to ask that what can make a code not to work? Why might a code not produce the result that is expected to produce? Well, there are varieties of reasons for it, and one of it is that sometimes programming code might contain syntax error or logical error. So in the context of what you are building or what you are writing, there can be syntax errors or logical errors which might not make your code to work the way you expect it to work. And many of these errors are difficult to diagnose, especially if you have a large number of lines of code. It can be difficult to diagnose. And in situations like that, when code fails as a beginner, the often thing might be that, okay, you want to guess what is wrong. You might be thinking that, oh, what is wrong is A. And in actual sense, what is wrong might not even be related to A. So the often thing that beginner does is that they usually guess instead of trying to debug and find the actually the actual thing that is wrong. So instead of guessing, one should just debug. A beginner should just debug, which is the opposite of guessing. So debugging is just to check facts that, okay, where might something go wrong or what must have gone wrong in this code. So when you want to debug, a good debugging habit is that you read your code, you can, reproduce it. Maybe you copy it from the file that is not working to another file and try to reproduce it. And then you can also reduce. So you can reduce part of the code to see maybe the last working parts before the error came up. And then that allows you to know the part where to check to diagnose for the error. And then when you reduce it and discover such error, then you can fix it easily inside that file. So a good debugging habit is to read the error, to reproduce the problem, to reduce to a small example, and then you fix it. Now, oftentimes when programming code contain errors, nothing will happen. For example, when you are using a try and catch code block to simulate, an error or to catch error, sometimes there are some error that might not even stop the execution of your code. And the only thing that will let you know that there's an error is only when they produce a result that is different from what you expect. Because oftentimes there are no error messages and you will get no indication where to search for errors. Thank God for improvements in the code editors that programmers use these days, that this code editor can easily lint an error and let you know that, oh, if you make a mistake or there's a syntax that is not supported, it will easily just give you a rescue daylight to lint it and tell you that, oh, there's an error somewhere in your code. But oftentimes, Some errors will not even give you any message and no indication as to where to know to search for the error. So searching for and fixing errors in programming code is called code debugging. Now, errors can and will always happen every time you write computer code. Does not matter your stage, your level or your stage. It is a normal thing for error to always happen anytime you write computer code. Now, let's talk about JavaScript debuggers. Debugging is actually not easy, but fortunately, all modern browsers have a built-in JavaScript debugger. For example, if you are using a Mozilla browser or a Chrome browser or Edge by Microsoft, each of these has a debugger where you can check for errors in case something is not consistent or is not working the way you expect it to work in your code. So built-in debuggers can be turned on and off, forcing errors to be reported to the user. And with a debugger, you can also set breakpoints, places where code execution can be stopped, and examine variables while the code is executing. So one thing before we move on is that there's actually something like a joke I want to talk about, and it's the fact that the first no computer bug was a real bug, an insect, and the bug was found stuck in the electronics. So debugging is also one of the skills that a developer or a programmer is expected to have, especially when you program code or when you write, computer code. So if you want to do debugging, how do you approach it? Well, there are a series of steps here, and the number one says look in the console. Now, the browser console shows error and messages from JavaScript. If your code does nothing, then the console often tell you why. If there are errors and your code does not do what it's supposed to do, then the console will often tell you why, what is wrong, maybe an error occur, and where that error actually occur. Now, how do you activate debugging in your browser? You can use the F12 key, and then you select the console in the debugger menu, and the console will pop up, and then you'll be able to access whatever it is that you want to access. So what I'm basically saying is this: so if I want to debug, if something is not working on my page, I can just right click it for me and click on inspect. I am using a Firefox browser, and you can see my console. So if there's anything here, let's say I write something like let x, and I say something like x equals to 2. Now, if there is an error in my code, or let me do something like this, const. Let me use const. You can see my editor is already telling me that there's an error. I can see it in my console. Missing equals in constant declaration, which means that I cannot redeclare a constant variable. So this is how you trace bugs in your code. Another thing is to use the console.log. You can use the console.log to print value to the console. For example, so if I do something like console.log x, now you can see this, it's still showing me that error and it's not showing anything. But what if I give this a value of 2? You can see it is giving me the right value. So the console.log can help me to see what my code is doing at time. And lastly, confirm your assumptions. Many times bugs happen because you assume a value is something, but it's not. So when you assume something, always confirm it by checking the value and the type that you think that assumption is all about. So by doing this, you can easily always follow these 3 steps to debug whatever is wrong in your code at any point in time.